Welcome to the Avatar Slang Podcast, your go-to for fiction, fandom, and nerd culture, where they intersect with politics, society, and everything in between. Before we dive in, follow the podcast on Spotify or your favorite platform so you never miss an episode. Watching on YouTube, then like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Sharing, reviewing, and spreading the word helps the podcast grow. For more nerdy content, follow me on TikTok and Instagram at Avatar Slang. Today I'm joined by Ernest Crim III. He's an educator, speaker, and activist. He uses history as a tool for empowerment. We discuss Black history, media representation, the power of storytelling, and how comic, sci-fi, animation can be used as tools for activism and education. Now let's get into it. How you doing today, Eric?
I'm good, man. I'm still coming down off Black History Month is real busy. So I'm just man. So I'm just trying to get back some sense of, normalcy and get ready for the book and everything. And, just moving, man, just trying to pace myself.
Okay, so what kind of things were you doing for Black History Month?
Well, so for me, my typical work week can look like I might have one speaking engagement, like tomorrow I'm speaking at a school. Sometimes it's virtual. It might be speaking to students or staff. It could be speaking to a company. Other than that, I might have a few paid posts to do. Normally, it could be for a local business. It could be for a nonprofit or organization that's justice oriented. So I might have to craft that. And then, I have a social media assistant that helps me post throughout the day sometimes. So like putting those things in order takes up time too, like scheduling certain things, maybe finding a video that'll resonate. Creating new videos takes time. But then also too, it's just like everything else. It could be like, the writing, it could be brainstorming new ideas. So I say all that to say that's my baseline. And then Black History Month, as the urgency of everybody else is like, now we want to talk to you. So it became a lot of TV interviews, radio, traveling a little bit. And that's in addition to like having kids who have a busy schedule too. So that's it can be a lot, man. But I'm grateful though, because I mean, it's a starting point. Hopefully it becomes a thing that people are interested in all year round. So
how long have you been? You started as a teacher, correct?
I started off teaching, man. I started off teaching in, I would say 2009, 2010, right out of college. I wanted to teach, man, because I took, a Black history course in college. And that was my first time being able to take a course about myself, in one space. Like I grew up in an environment where my mom and my dad, they taught us Black history in passing. We had an environment that was immersed in it. We had, the sculptures in the house, like you can see in my office. We had the paintings and things, but, they weren't professors of Black history. So when I took this course and I was on the verge of flunking out of school, it meant something more to me because it was like my way of betting on myself and saying, I'm going to take a course I never took before. And if I don't do well in this course, it's likely that I might not even be back at this university and I would have wasted all my money. And I have not looked back, man. I was 2006. It's been 19 years since I took that course and I fell in love with it, bro. It was like from that moment forward, I remember the professor, everything, Professor Clarence Lang. I started going to the front of each class. I started reading on my own, reading to get ahead, buying books to read for the first time. And when I took my second course, it became solidified to me that I needed to take that path because that professor was so dynamic. And I found out eventually that he also taught my mom at a completely different university 30 years prior. Yeah, man. So for me, it was like teaching was a way to give information that I felt could change our entire circumstances in life. And I didn't think that people should have to go spend $20,000, $30,000 to do it. So I wanted to meet people where they were. I thought about becoming a professor, but again, like the extra time it would have taken for me just to do what I want to do now. So I said, well, maybe teaching is the route. And that's kind of why I got started. It was more so first having a love for us, but then understanding that history combined with that could help us in a way that was unimaginable because it was something that helped me out profoundly. And that's why I started teaching, man. It was to mentor. It was for me to help reimagine who we are as people. And that's eventually what I would begin to do full time, not just in the class, but also now as a public teacher.
Question, you're from Chicago, correct? And
yes.
Where was your school at?
So I went to the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. It's about 2 hours from Chicago. So, I mean, it's still in the area. It's central Illinois. but it's also far enough away where you feel like you're isolated and you're able to grow up away from your parents. Because with that said, I thoroughly enjoyed my college experience. I ain't come home a lot. So I was there. Like I was immersed in it. I was on my own, especially when I got that apartment. So it became like I was the baby of the family, the youngest of two, but I had to figure these things out. And not only was I, taking this Black History course in 2006 that changed my life, but I'm at a PWI. So I'm in Central Illinois. This ain't Chicago. This ain't like a Black area. Outside of the university, you leave there, it's Central Illinois, bro. It's like the South. But you still also have those pockets, just like in Chicago, that were segregated towns where Black people lived. And I began to see these similarities, not just from what Chicago was like, but it was like almost everywhere we were, they found a way to redline and isolate us. In that same semester, they were having blackface parties at the school. So my first year there, I think Facebook, 2006, yeah, 2006, bro. I might be off 6 or 7, but it's in the book, so I got all the dates in there. But bro, I'm telling you, like, I'm coming from the South Side, having not even learned about blackface, and I remember buying Little Brothers album, this hip hop group from North Carolina, and their album was called The Minstrel Show. Classic, bro. And I remember reading the booklet. Back in the day, we buy the albums, we read in the book for the lyrics and the background, and they're explaining what the minstrel show was. Something like, and that's art at its best to me. It's entertaining and it's education. So then I'll take a course to learn further. And then at the same time, there's a white fraternity having a blackface party, and they're also having a brownface party, mocking Hispanic culture. So like, it wasn't just that I loved the history, it came alive to me that same year because I'm seeing how like the dynamic of it impacting us today still.
Got it. That's kind of what my platform's for. Like, obviously, you see the background. I'm into I'm from Philly, so they like the weird stuff.
Yeah.
My thing is I'm trying to bridge these stories to how they relate to society. And to me, everything that happens in this country affects Black people. And I think it affects us the hardest, no matter what it is, whether it's pollution or whether it's, even things like plastic straws, because we get microplastics in us because of our environment.
100%. Yeah, man, I think like we are the very foundation of this country. We were forced to be the foundation of this country. So anything that happens on the top floor of that foundation is going to impact the people at the bottom. And truthfully, this country can only last as much as we are engaged in it, because like the things that have come from this, that have come from this country that have benefited all people primarily have come off the backs of our advocacy over the course of the years. Because if it had not even been for Black folks stepping up, and that's not to say it's always been 100% Black, but because we have felt the brunt of that, we have stood up and we fought. If it had not been for that, we're talking about a country that still might only allow white men with property to vote. Not even white women. You know what I'm saying? So it is something to it, and also too to the point of storytelling. I think we come into this country, man, having a history of people coming from griots who, in West Africa especially, like we did not always document our histories with the written text, but we documented by telling these stories. And we have so many amazing allegories and mythology that we have been kept in the dark about, that I think if our community knew more about them, would be interested in topics like that related to comics and things of that nature. And I think primarily a lot of us grew up not seeing ourselves reflected in it. So we probably felt we had no business in it until we saw T'Challa on the big screen.
So question, did you know I was West African when you said that?
Oh yeah, I did. Yeah, I do my research. So and again, bro, like, we cousins in that sense, right? Because I'm sure you could probably speak to some of that lived experience, right? And my experience was one that was detached for hundreds of years, but it's still within us. It's like I look at myself as a griot, or I guess in the proper term, a jelly, who keeps these stories and traditions alive. And that is like, that's who we are. We gather around our ancestors, the grandpa, the father, and we want to hear the story. And that's how we survive. And that's how we keep our traditions alive. I mean, for me, even thinking about this idea of representation and stories and comics and things of that nature. Like we have, when I talk to audiences, I always tell them like the importance of us, especially kids, seeing themselves represented. And I talk about the fact that my kids, of course, love, Disney movies. We're on Disney Plus all the time. We don't have a story about African cultures and traditions. So we think until we dissect what the Lion King is actually about the Epic of Sundiata. And I tell people how much damage that actually does psychologically, or if we think about it, because once you realize that's an African story that involved real people, that they twisted to incorporate animals, and then you compare that to how Disney has, made stories about a variety of different ethnic groups on every continent using real people, it makes you look at yourself and say, like, well, in a sense, say, why weren't we portrayed in that way? Because I think about Disney, like Lion King, bro, is one of my favorite movies. But like, imagine what that would have done to millions of kids' imagination to not see Mufasa as an animal, but as a black man, a dark-skinned black man. And think about all the various remakes and stuff like that. I mean, I think Beyonce tried, when she made that film, the musical Black is King, but it's still to the point, like, we see the movie like Soul, I think Princess and the Frog, but there's still like, y'all took us out the movie. Yeah, you took us out the movie in both, like a frog in one, and then we were like a spirit or a ghost in the other one.
Know that the Tiana series just got canceled?
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Ago, so the argument, what you just said, came up again on, I guess, Black Instagram.
Right. And again, I think so. I think with all of these is twofold. I always tell people that when we see blatant disrespect like that, there's two approaches. I say agitate, which can be like a form of protest and raising awareness about it, and then also create. I think Disney is too big of an entity for many of us to, and of course anybody could do a personal boycott, but I think it's too big of an entity and a mainstay in our community for us to be like, we're going to get rid of Disney. Disney going to be here, right? So there is merit to saying, Disney, y'all got to do better. They even have some African stories I know on Disney Plus, but like, again, it's a difference between it being on Disney Plus for streaming versus on a big screen. Counterpoint, we also have a lot of Black folks who are getting involved in creating their own stories or bringing our historical stories to the big screen. I actually work closely with a brother who's working with Black Sands and who created Black Sands Entertainment, Manuel Godoy. Yeah, so we partner, we do work together, help promote each other's products and things like that. And he is doing this like 100% independent. Like, he was on Shark Tank, but that didn't work out. So now he's crowdfunding the release of an anime that's going to come out that's centering our stores. That's what we got to do.
The algorithm knows us. So, that's a trending topic lately in our community.
Yeah.
What's the best way to go about that? You think? Like, there's a couple different ways, but like you said, it's hard.
Yeah.
These companies they're here.
Yeah. Man, so I would, so I'm going to tackle this as best I can, in podcast format. I'll probably have to write about this and make a video about it for it to really be effective. But I think you have to always begin any endeavor with the end in mind. So you got to know, like, what are you in this for? Like, there's a boycott of Target that's ongoing, right? People within the Black community and people who support us are saying they want to boycott Target, because not just because Target got rid of DEI, because a lot of companies have, but Target has always attempted to position itself as an ally to the community. In 2020, like, their headquarters are in Minnesota. They spoke out, right? And over the course of the years, they added more Black-owned brands than most companies that I'm aware of. When they jumped shark immediately, once that executive order passed, it made a statement to a lot of us and said, okay, you don't really respect us like you say we do. So in that ends, from that perspective, with a large corporation like that, the end goal, I'm assuming, has to be reintegration into that society. A company that big is probably not going to fail immediately, so that would be the end goal of the boycott or the protest. Now, anything is possible, though, because we know Kmart used to be a thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, Circuit City used to be a thing. We could really exercise our power and make a change like that. So that's one end of the protest, right? The other end of the protest for me is we have to then begin to say, well, why don't we have a story a store on the level of a Walmart or Target. And we cannot, because oftentimes when we ask those questions of Black people, first we have to understand, yeah, we about 13% of the population. But oftentimes we enter that question or conversation from a deficit model. And we say, we say that, oh, Black people probably didn't work hard enough. Black people are spending too much money. Black people aren't practicing group economics. And all these things are false. Over the course of our history, we have done co-ops. We've done mutual aid. We were supporting each other and creating nonprofits before that was even a thing, right? That's how we weren't applying for government grants. That stuff didn't exist back then. So what happened? We were creating stores, but they were torn down due to white terrorism and racism, racial violence, right? I mean, I did a video the other day about how with Ida B. Wells, she begins to jump into activism with her writing to raise awareness about lynchings because her close friends were lynched because they owned a successful grocery store next to a white one. So what happens? That's in 1892, bro. Imagine if that never happens, an alternate reality. What is the people's grocery store now? That might be the Walmart. That might be the Target. Walmart and Target that start to the 60s, right? What's going on in the 60s? They're getting started in the 60s as we just trying to say, treat us right. So you come in already able to profit while we are just trying to get scraps together because we're being systemically discriminated against. So the other protest has to be, we have been disenfranchised systemically over the course of these years. Black Wall Street had roughly 40 grocery stores and butchers, man. So imagine what that could have become on a national level, right? So the other protest has to be politically. We demand these corporations treat us better, and we also demand political equity through the form of reparations, whatever you want to call it, compensation, investments in these communities, because truthfully, all that was taken from us cannot be restored just by telling somebody to work hard, go to school, get a degree. The stuff that was taken away has put us in a hole that has not been our own. So we need some assistance from the very taxes we give to be pulled up. So I think that's an important element of it too. So we always got to start with the end in mind, but I don't think it's beneficial to only protest against the system without also focusing on creating your own as well.
I agree with that, because I think sometimes we get caught up in these online narratives because we see them and we don't know the end game. It just gets, I think, along with is messy.
Right. And we got to be realistic too, because like we have to think about, are there communities where Target, Walmart are the only option to shop, and there are Black people there? Probably so. So then what do? Okay, shop on Amazon? Then we tell people don't shop Amazon too, right? So what do? Okay, maybe we go Instacart. And then like, how much extra are we paying for somebody to go grocery shopping, far away? Like there are some communities in Chicago on the South Side where like that Target might be right in your neighborhood and it's providing fresh food and groceries. So again, we got to always question, well, shoot, why don't we have Black-owned grocery stores all throughout Chicago or New York or LA? So we can't, at that point, we cannot chastise people who aren't able to fully commit to it, given the economic condition. A boycott to me is also putting yourself, you have to have a position of privilege to be able to do that. To say that I'm going to forego this local store around the corner and drive a little bit further is a position of economic privilege. Now, we can also say the Montgomery bus boycott, those folks weren't rich, but what they have that we don't seem to have as much now is the discipline of focus and a sustained community that was willing to come together and support folks who weren't able to probably, forego getting on the bus.
Like, I'm in Philly. I see a lot more individualism. Like, I'm born 91, so I'm 33 now. And even in the 90s and 2000s, I see more signs of community. It doesn't seem that way. And I moved around the Philly area. I don't see it that much anymore. So, my scope,
man,
I agree with you.
Straight up, bro. I'm an 87 baby, so we the same generation. Same thing, bro. I mean, I was just watching this video I shared on my story where they were talking about in New York how in the 70s communities would have rent parties, and that's something I've had friends from other generations tell me about too. That if somebody in your community, in your building, maybe couldn't afford rent, y'all get together and raise money for that person. There was a point in time growing up, I remember, as so-called dangerous as people would say Chicago was or is, We grew up doors unlocked all day because we knew all our neighbors. Like, it's not to say things were perfect, but in our neighborhood, there was a close knit community. You might fight somebody the next day, y'all cool. Like folks weren't like we weren't getting shot over stupid stuff like that. And also too, to what I was engaged in, people respected folks like me and my other friends who they knew weren't engaged in that street stuff. Rules. They knew, like, for me, I wasn't just like I was a hooper, but also too they knew like how my mom was as an educator, so they knew I was a dude that was in the book. So for them, it was like if I see what they would call me Ernie, if I see Ernie over there messing around, getting involved in something, I'm gonna pull him to the side and go tell his mom because you ain't supposed to be doing this stuff right here. I think there's an element of it, but it's not to the same degree, and there are a lot of variables that go into that. But also too with social media, we're connected, but we're disconnected.
They are.
I think a lot of the propaganda on social media, through the algorithm, has made us become afraid of each other. And I don't just mean like, black folks being afraid. I'm talking about like people in general. We're afraid to interact, afraid of what can happen if this person goes here, or like we're afraid of letting our kids explore. And I think that has had an immeasurable impact on all of us, man. Like we truly cannot do what we are aspiring to do, the boycotts, the protests, whatever it is, unless we build community first. That has to be the first priority.
Yeah, I agree. And to the point about you said the algorithm scaring people, statistics came out recently. Yeah. This is way off topic, but the statistics came out and it said something like crime is actually down. But don't feel like it.
Yeah. Bro, like seriously, when I was growing up in the 90s in Chicago, man, the murder rate some years was 900. 800, 900, right? Now, yeah, now through the 2010s, all they did on social media, they were doing these counts, bro, like these tallies. This many people shot in Chicago over the weekend. This many people shot on this July 4th weekend. This many people, like, it was almost like a race or a competition to see if Chicago could outdo each other, man. It was real sick, right? But even during that time, the murder rates were around 400 or 500. So we talking half of what it was when I was growing up. But also, too, I had no knowledge of that. I heard of shootings. I heard the shots. I knew people who was in gangs. I knew something but because I was like, my community was my neighborhood, my home, my church, school. I'm going back and forth there. I'm playing ball. I wasn't inundated with a 24-hour news cycle. So I didn't feel like, and I knew there were certain neighborhoods. My mom was, don't cross over there because we don't like different gang sets. We don't know them like that. But like, I didn't feel the same anxiety that I've heard people say, black, white, otherwise, that would say, I don't want to go over there in Chicago because I might get shot. I might get robbed. And it's like, why do you believe that? Who taught you that, right?
Now we know this
propaganda, man. It's for purpose.
You probably answered this already. So how can, while I'm into things like comics, sci-fi, animation, how can that serve as a tool for teaching history and activism? Man,
to me, it's the foundation for how we can get kids involved and interested in history more. I'm very particular about my word. And so I often say historical narrative because that's what it is. History is a narrative. History is literally every single thing that's happening right now. But not every single thing that's happening right now will one day be studied. They're not going to be studying the car that just drove down my street unless it did something that changed and impacted people's lives, right? So the historical narrative is choosing what route we want to go based on the people's lives that were impacted that we deem the most important. Our historical narrative in America is always from a male heterosexual lens, right? Christian lens, right? It's always through that lens. So we see it from the lens of the colonists, the brave colonists who came to explore for religious freedom, to escape persecution. We see it from the lens of George Washington with the busted wig and the tights and stuff like that. We see it through that lens. That's all a narrative, a story. But for kids that look and people that look like us, we want to hear about the people like Jimmy and the Stone Age Rebellion that fought back. We want to hear that. Imagine the Stone Age Rebellion, the most successful slave revolt in colonial America. Imagine that as a comic. Imagine that as a film. And imagine storytellers finding a way to fill in the gaps. Because what we do then, that's great with the historical narrative and how we transition that to, film and comics is the things we don't know, we create the story, the dialogue based on how those people were. That would get people intrigued. You don't even want to call it history then. We can just call it like graphic novels. To me, my kids love that, right? Before you know it, people are learning history without realizing it. So it's just like, I mean, I've heard people online talk about, I think Harriet Tubman was in one of these video games. I can't remember the name, but they had some type of storyline where I think they picked different historical periods or whatever. But there was a storyline where Harriet Tubman was like the part where she had to save people off the plantation during the Civil War. Like, bro, like imagine that as a superhero game or something. That gets you involved. And then every like transition, they might, provide a primary source or something like that. We just have to make people remember that these were actual people. Like the all of that stuff, fiction is based on the nonfiction. You know what I'm saying? So I think we just have to remind people that and be clear on when we are steering away from the facts and embellishing a little bit for entertainment purpose.
It's interesting because I was just reading something. It might have been by, I feel terrible. I'll put her name in the notes, but she's her niche is books. She's a Black woman, and I commented, we were talking about how people think fiction is like dumb. But then I was reading how fiction actually creates empathy. It creates more empathy than nonfiction. Because, like, for instance, if you're reading a novel, it could be any novel, like let's say Harry Potter. Harry Potter is not considered, like, to a lot of like nerds, he's not considered like an impressive character. But because you share his perspective, his struggles, you start to relate to everything he's going through. So it's not about how impressive he is. It's just the fact that you're on the journey with him through all his nonsense. So
exactly, bro, that's exactly why for me, and I think you just illuminated something to me I didn't really think about. I think that's why I like Marvel more than DC. I didn't grow up really reading comics. I watched the cartoons and the movies and stuff like that. Yeah, like, and I'm just thinking like, I think Batman is probably my favorite DC character, but even still, his story is a little out of touch to me because he's a billionaire. I loved, man, I still do, Spider-Man. I was just watching a new series with my kids. They got a new series on Disney. Like, I love that. And again, he don't look like me in the cartoon, but I love the storyline of this kid who was shy, didn't really was not really popular, had these crushes on these girls, but was afraid to approach. And that's very relatable. And then he gets this superhuman strength to save. Like, that creates the empathy for the person, but also to the relatability that you can't just get from dissecting somebody's biography or something like that. It's the same thing with like the X-Men character. I love the Wolverine, the relatableness of his character and things like that. And I'll be real with you. I read a lot of nonfiction, of course, like biographies, social science books, history books, and stuff like that. Yeah, but I think the thing that I probably need to delve more into, because I do actually, I love like the Marvel, the superhero stories, is that's probably my aspect of fiction that I'm attracted to. Because again, the Black Panther story, very relatable. The dynamic between the T'Challa and the Killmonger, and just imagining what could have been in Africa and what could be if we keep that vision alive.
It's interesting that you say that, because in a lot of ways, that was the point of Marvel. Before people started using the word woke in a bad way, that was actually the point. They did whatever they could within the social constructs that, whatever they could get away with is what they did. So in these, so the X-Men originally were 5 white teens, but in the 70s, they decided to make it an international team. That's how we got Wolverine from Canada, India, someone from Ireland, I don't remember his name, and somebody from Japan. And that was a hit. So they hit in two ways. They were attracting people who were of different backgrounds, and they were telling good stories. So that was Marvel's whole point. So even when DC has Black superheroes, it still doesn't hit the same, because Marvel's whole thing is to immerse themselves into our world, people powers.
That's dope. I didn't know that. I do know the how do you feel about the rumor that Stan Lee based Professor Xavier and Magneto on Dr. King and Malcolm X?
That I've been researching that for a while. The sources are conflicting, but I think at the very least, those types of people were his inspiration. The only reason I don't like comparing Magneto to Malcolm X is because Malcolm X was like, correct me if I'm wrong, he was more willing to do, he was more willing to go
Yeah.
there. I don't think he ever really did.
Yeah. He never did. No, he never did. Yeah, that's a great point. Yep, because I think also too with his being in the Nation of Islam through that isolation, he never truly had to, but he was always telling folks like, look, if this what happens, we'll do it. Like there's even that story of when he sent Dr. King a telegram when they were protesting in St. Augustine, and he said, "Yo, say the word. I'm gonna have all my brothers to send down there to protect y'all." There's also that scene in Malcolm X's movie that he talks about in his book where there was one of his brothers was the victim of police brutality, and they all marched down to the hospital or to the police station demanding that he get equitable treatment while he was there and recover. Right. So it was this thing. It was this. If you don't do this, this peaceful demonstration is going to turn to something else. But I think also too, like even if Stan Lee wasn't explicitly impacted by it, which I think he probably was though, because understanding his background, it had to be at least one. It had to be an influence, maybe a variety. But there's always that. Yeah, it's always that duality in any movement. There are some who kind of take the Dr. King approach, some who might take a Malcolm X approach, but also too, they came together though at one point. They wanted to come together towards the end of their lives.
I would say the thing about Magneto is because Magneto's actually nuts. Like,
yeah,
spoiler alert. In X-Men 97, he wiped out the electrical grid for the whole planet. Malcolm X wouldn't do that or anything of that magnitude. Like, one bad thing happened to him. Snap. Magneto's supposed to be Killmonger is a lot like Magneto. So
yeah, very much.
But yeah, you kind of nailed it with the DC versus Marvel thing, because like Marvel the characters is about the unless it's Spider-Man, most characters are the person first and the hero second, whereas in DC it's superhero first, character second.
Yeah. Right. That's why we on the rock with Superman. It just don't like. I mean, if I know they all got superhero powers, but it's just something about Superman is like, okay, you can't even really be beat, man. You got superhuman strength. You flying. You can see through wall. You can just do whatever. Like there's something about all the other ones where they're strong, they're this, but they still have a weakness. Like we know, like I love Spider-Man, but we know it's only so much you could do with that web. There's only so much you can do by jumping on walls, right? You got to be able to come together with people.
So that's the thing with Superman. They didn't do so. There's things to him that's supposed to be liked, but it goes back to marketing. They didn't really. They didn't.
Yeah, he's white and suburban, man. I mean, like the suburban vibe, like like clean cut, like work at and they both like Spider-Man and Superman both worked at like a news station, I believe, right? Or worked as journalists, but it was just completely different vibe.
So on the recent Spider-Man movie, Jamie Foxx was on it as a villain, and he talked to Spider-Man. He was like, he told him about his mask. It was because they reboot Spider-Man all the time. In this version, it was all the actors together. And Jamie Foxx is from the 2010s version, but he came into the new Marvel version, or a mashup, basically.
Yeah.
And he talked to Peter Parker, and he was like, honestly, I thought you were a black guy. So, to your point, Spider-Man is relatable to a lot of black people. And that's why they had to do his Miles.
Yeah, I mean, dude didn't like. Yeah, I like how they even did that too, though. Like they made it an alternative universe type vibe. But yeah, I mean, he's very relatable because like his backstory, like when I really think about it, he went through a lot. Because it occurred to me when I was watching the newer series. For one, I didn't like how they made like super young and these more recent. Like I don't know, like I yeah, it's like she almost look like his sister now. But even one episode, I was thinking, I was like, dang, whatever happened to his parents though? I don't think I ever really had an understanding of that outside of he lost Uncle Ben. But I had never really understood where his parents were in general. And that just made me even, again, want to do some more research on like what did Stan Lee originally have. And so again, there's this idea of the various struggles that anybody can really deal with, but particularly our background, our history, some of the things we've dealt with to be able to see that as somebody, especially as a teenager doing this, it was just very impressionable.
He's neurodivergent. So, you grew up in the 90s, like a lot of people diagnosed with that.
Yeah.
So a lot of our people
Yeah.
relate to
Right.
him being time blind or
Yep.
like wanting to do the right thing and he's just spread too thin. Like
Exactly. One and a half.
a lot of the black kids, we wanted to get God to help our parents out.
Yeah.
A lot of white kids don't go through that. Spider-Man does.
Yeah. Yep. And sure, hey, somebody, I think it was a comedian that said this before too, like, we think Spider-Man black is a Spidey sense too. Like, you know what I'm saying? That intuition, that vibe we have when we in an environment and we're like, nah, something off.
It's like you ever be at wherever, like Chinese store or wherever you go to, and you see the same car do a lap. And how does that make you feel?
Yeah. Like, hold on, that's something right. It's the same thing. Like I've read, I've heard psychologists talk about how when you come from an environment of trauma, like if you go to an establishment, like let's say you go to a restaurant and sit down, you'll often want to face the window or the door so you can kind of see what's going on, right? And I remember one time I went to go. I was in the Bay Area in Cali. I met up with a friend who's from Oakland. We went out to get something to eat, and there was like some outdoor seating. And we both sat down at this table, and we both sat towards the front, like picnic tables, and we were both like facing this way as we're talking. So as we're talking, we're still looking as the cars are approaching, and it clicked to me there too, because we didn't want to be caught off guard. We didn't want nothing to jump off and happen without us being aware. And it's just like that intuition and understanding that, and it's a trauma response because at any time something could go wrong.
When I go to certain places that I don't know, or even places I do know, I always plan to escape.
Yeah. On alert, bro. Always thinking like, so if something pop up, where am I going? Okay, I'm over here.
Okay, so I'm not crazy then.
No, bro, that's intuition.
Okay, so you have a book coming out.
Yeah. So this is my third book, but it's my first book with a publisher. It's called How Black History Can Save Your Life, From the Talk to George Floyd, Everything You Need to Know to De-Escalate a Racist Situation. This book was birthed, speaking of trauma, it was birthed from trauma. So like I said before, I taught for 12 years. Halfway through my teaching career, I dealt with a hate crime with my wife, something that I would have never thought happened to me. But as I tell people all the time, that's truly our experience worldwide as Black folks. We mind our business, and then sometimes we get caught up in some white stuff, man, some white mess or whatever. And this lady started calling us the N-word because I grabbed the beanbag at this outdoor party that I thought she was done using. So she just got really frustrated as she's there with her two Black friends. And I started to record because she's calling security, she's calling cops and everything. And it just escalates from there. She just got so frustrated. She was acting like I had stole some money from her or something, man. And then as she begins to walk away, she spits on us. And from that point, her friends are there converging in and the police are coming over. They eventually kick her out. And we realized that we had the whole crime on camera. So I posted online for justice. But in the midst of getting her arrested, going back and forth to court, taking off work, I had a mental health episode, bro, a breakdown. And it occurred to me that I was, for one, I was doing too much, right? I was trying to take on the world, and I hadn't really processed what happened to me in that moment. And not just then, but what has happened to me throughout my whole life as a Black man. Like, that wasn't the first time I dealt with racism, right? But because it was the most violent expression of it, that's the thing everybody wanted to talk about and cared about. But I was like, nah, I need to write about this to like release this pain as a catharsis, right? But also too, to let people know Black folks don't just deal with racism when they get called, or if they get called the N-word. That's the least of our worries, truthfully. Because to me, you from Philly, I'm from Chicago. The most racist thing is I grew up in a red line neighborhood. My neighborhood didn't have, violence and have gangs because people just wanted to. It was because we were like literally like resources were taken away from our community systemically by law, codified by law, intentionally on purpose. So the book, it enters through the hate crime, But then imagine a movie starting with that hate crime, and then in that same instance, as it happens, it takes you back to all the other instances where I dealt with similar situations, overtly or covertly, and how I was able to counterpunch those with stories of Black history that I learned about throughout my life. And that's coming out March 20.
So where could we get that at?
So you can get it, man, all the major retailers have it. Of course, I'm telling people, like, please don't purchase it from Amazon. Please don't get it from Target. It's on their site, but don't get it from there, please. You can get it from Barnes & Noble. That's a big book retailer. You can get it from some of your local bookshops. I would recommend going to Semicolon Bookstore online. That's a Black woman-owned bookstore in Chicago that has it. There's a bookstore I know called Call and Response in Chicago in the Hyde Park neighborhood that has it as well. And also, too, on my site, ernestcrim.com, ERNESTCRIM.
Okay. So this is your third book?
Yeah, sort of, right? So my first book was self-published, and it was called Black History Saved My Life, right? I put that out in 2020, but again, that was self-published. Then I put out a children's book called The ABCs of Affirming Black Children, self-published. I hired an illustrator, all of that. So this third book is almost like the second edition of Black History Saved My Life. So imagine this, right? I started writing this book in 2017. We all know the whole 2010s, we talking about the Black Lives Matter movement is on the up and up. We see all these viral videos of police and all this stuff like that. We got Trump that's about to be in office. So I'm writing the book in that environment, right? I put it out in February of 2020. I had no idea 3 weeks later the whole world was going to shut down. So 3 weeks after I put my book out, I never even got a chance to have like a book sign and none of that stuff, bro. And then let's say 3 months later, the whole world was shook up after George Floyd was murdered. So my book does not include any reflections on what happened with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, the 2024 election. So I was able to, with this release, I was able to add some reflections on what happened with the Black Lives Matter movement of 2020, what happened with Breonna Taylor, folks like that. I was able to take out some parts that didn't need to be in there anymore. I added some new chapters. And also, I finished writing this update right after the election was my deadline. So I was able to even include some commentary about Trump and Kamala's election.
I want to talk to you about that because I always wonder, because I've been following you for years.
Mm-hmm.
So
Thank you.
I live in Philly, very blue. It's like probably like it's in my experience, it's super, super blue. So like it's so blue that I'm sure you see this at least sometimes that even the Democrats get attacked over here. Like, have you ever heard the Harris backlash that she's a cop and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, shoot, Philly was of course, besides being the first capital, like Philly was also a capital for liberation for Black people, man. So there's a lot of, prominent Black history, U.S. history there. And the backlash that I don't think any politician is above critique and backlash, but I also think we have to be honest about the system we live in. I think that it feels weird saying this, but I think we hold politicians to too high a standard. Like, America is a settler colonial state. This is an empire that rests upon its ability to colonize, enslave, and participate in genocide. Yeah, right, exactly. And market it as if it's something that's not. So any federal politician, in a sense, unless they are completely radical, right, they have to participate in the maintenance of that. So we'll never have a perfect politician. Like, they could have great policy ideas, but they might be a cop. They could have great policy ideas, but maybe there was a time in which they did something that we don't agree with. If we are saying that we still want this entity of America, then oftentimes you're going to have to choose the person that's going to help you get better access to live a more fulfilling life. It does not mean they have to be our role model. They don't have to be a superhero. They ain't going to be Peter Parker and Spider-Man. They ain't going to be T'Challa. We just need somebody that's not going to get rid of healthcare for everybody, that's not going to put unnecessary tariffs up, right? And then we continue to agitate because no one politician, no matter how great that president could be, is truly going to wipe away or solve the issue that has been caused by 200-300 years of genocide, enslavement, sexism, racism, capitalism, all of that.
I like the way you put that because you pointed out no one's above criticism, but you said we have to be realistic with the system we're in because these same people that
Yeah.
like I said, the far left people, not that like I'm actually pretty far left, but I'm talking about a certain type of far leftists hate everything. Like people attack Bernie Sanders, and I'm like, I mean, he says I agree with most of what he says. Like I don't see, not to say he's perfect. Perfection doesn't mean.
Yeah, bro. I think that so I come from, and I've had to unlearn some of this stuff. When I was in college, man, Obama was running. Okay, so I want you to imagine this for a second. I'm from Chicago, bro. Like I grew up, and I'll talk about this in my book too. Just like growing up and asking my mom why we haven't had a black president. So it didn't make sense to me because I saw images of black leadership in my house. I saw pictures. I was learning about myself. I had my mom and parents, my dad, my grandmother. They gave me books on Black history. So I'm thinking, why don't we have a black president in this country? It don't make sense, right? Then I go to college. I become interested in Black history. 2006. A year later, we hear about a brother, you know what I'm saying, who is running for president, who got his start career-wise, met his wife in the same side of town I'm from. And the stuff he was speaking about, to me, sounded really good, right? So when he gets elected, we have these unrealistic expectations of him that I'm able to honestly look back on and say that just wasn't feasible as a black man in that position, but also too as the first black man in that position. I don't think any of us could truly quantify what he probably dealt with in that position. We saw it on the back end. We saw people burning effigies and Obama dolls and stuff, but what was that like on a daily basis for him? I don't know. Like that's just like we ain't talking about the first black athlete in a sport. We're talking about the first black president. So I think that my standards were very, very high. So I was disappointed. Were very high. I had very high expectations, and I walked away feeling disappointed, man, in some respects because of some of the things I wanted him to do, right? But I would also chalk some of that up with being politically immature, though, because again, I was expecting him to do things that just weren't realistic for him to do. But I still keep those expectations, not on him, but for what I want to stand for and what I do. And I bring him up because I think that a lot of people who are very critical of, whether it be a black politician or a so-called progressive, a liberal politician, I think that we are expecting people, here's the metaphor, we are expecting people to become the manager of McDonald's, right? And then dismantle it. Right? You understand?
I see. Yeah.
To me, we're McDonald's. This is a very subpar nation. Like there are great people here, but in terms of what we don't have, like universal health care, we got people struggling on the street. We got all this money, right? McDonald's, all this money, and we feeding people poison, right? McDonald's is it's a company that's owned by people. The president is the shift manager. You're the shift manager for 4 years. When you get that job, your job is to sell quarter pounders, Big Macs, McChickens, McRibs. And I know you want people to eat some salads, but that ain't going to make the money. So if we're going to be in this restaurant, we got to be realistic about what the shift manager is going to do. It's possible one day we might get somebody who gets elected and completely does a 180 and tries to dismantle the McDonald's and put up a juice bar. But I just don't think that's practical. We got to just, again, be realistic on what they can do. And we have to place those same expectations or even higher expectations on what we can do and should do collectively.
So I agree with that. And you don't have to agree with this, but I personally think our media and our conversations are pretty left wing, at least liberal. They're at least pretty liberal.
Definitely.
We're a right wing country, and I came to that realization probably around the election time. And the more you travel, like again, you're in Chicago, I'm in Philly, so the urban bubble kind of makes you see things differently. But when you travel 2 hours away from the metro area, you're just like, oh, there's people that really think this or that. There's people like I go to school. No, I don't go to school. I go to I work at a school, and there's teachers there that really think Christopher Columbus discovered America. I'm like, you still think that?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, bro, we in a bubble, man. Like, and I say bubble, especially those of us who are actively engaged in unlearning the things we were miseducated about. Most people ain't trying to actively do that work. And you got to think, like, even though a lot of people are online in these social media spaces, they not gravitating towards a page like mine or other educators' pages. A lot of us have a tremendous following, but that's still a very small portion and percentage of the population. And also, too, we go against what the mainstream curriculums are
Yeah.
still teaching. So, like, these curriculums, by and large, are still, again, Eurocentric narratives. They're still teaching kids that Columbus discovered America, right? That lets you know off top that you're now learning it from the perspective of the people who are already here. Because it wouldn't be he discovered America, it would be he encountered people.
Yeah.
It's a big difference. He encountered people, or the indigenous people encountered him or discovered him,
Part,
right?
He never landed in the continental United States. Like, so it's like,
Exactly.
Why did they do that?
Exactly, bro. Exactly. Straight up propaganda, man. It's outrageous.
The empire, because I was talking to my sister, and she was like, "This is just an extension of the Roman Empire." So, and I see it every day.
Basically, yeah, man. I mean, shoot, like they want to recreate that field, and then at the same time, they selectively or covertly, steal certain remnants of Kemetic or ancient Egyptian culture too. I often ask audiences too, like, to reflect on the fact that for a lot of people in public schools, when they learn world history, they're gonna start with Greece and Rome, right? I was in a school high school, 99% black, but we starting world history with white people, as if those white people didn't hundreds of thousands, 10,000 of years prior leave from Africa, or that those same white folks didn't go to Africa to learn, right? They document, they mention that. But again, the historical narrative, being Eurocentric, says that we focus on the achievements and upliftment of them, and we are just a supporting cast member in their narrative. Same way, like you have more black people who can win the Academy Award for supporting actor and actress as opposed to being the main actor or actress.
Yes, that's a good analogy.
I mean, that's straight up, bro, because they teach history like they do the movies. You know what I'm saying? Like Pearl Harbor, like, and these things become etched in our minds as factual. Like we are more likely to reference a movie about a historical event than our teacher. Your teacher was teaching you that stuff for 9 months, but your teacher wasn't acting it out in the movie. They were lecturing you and you were falling asleep, or you had to read the book yourself and you probably weren't paying attention. But if it's a movie, Pearl Harbor is like, oh yeah, the Japanese people, they did this, and then, oh yeah, and then, like, but what about the internment camps? What about all this? You know what I'm saying? Like, we keep out a lot of important details because we're trying to build patriotism. And without patriotism, you cannot maintain the American empire. Without the false notion of patriotism and, American exceptionalism.
Destiny stuff. They try to make that sound cool.
Right, exactly.
Which reminds me, if you ever, I know you're a busy guy, but if you ever want to see a good allegory for American patriotism, Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Oh yeah, okay, I've heard of it. Never watched it though. Okay,
it's a Nicktoon, but you gotta bear with it. The first few episodes seems like a childish show, and when you realize they cover genocide, they cover colonialism, they cover
wow,
racism. They cover racism and propaganda. Like there's one episode where so it starts off as a typical cartoon. Whoever shoots fire, bad guys. That's how we see it. When you get to season, I think 3, the good guys are in the Fire Nation. All the people shoot fire, and they realize that those people are like us. Like, so if whatever president wants to send a bomb over to whatever country, we don't support that. We're just here, or we're even going against it, but they don't care about our voice in that moment. So I would say watch that if you ever have a chance.
Definitely. Wow, that's deep. No doubt.
Okay, let me see if I got anything down in the notes because we're approaching an hour. Okay, so the current administration, we touched on it a little bit, but it's a lot. I feel like a lot happens every day. Do you think that's a distraction?
Yeah.
or do you think or it depends on what it is?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a distraction as much as it is a way to, as someone said, just completely tear apart our souls day by day, because it's so much to focus on every day. It's like, okay, this executive order takes away DEI. This one's going to get rid of healthcare. This one is going to get rid of Head Start. This one is going to get rid of this. This one is going to raise tariffs. After a while, you lose focus. It's like you're running so many. It's like you're playing a basketball game and they're passing the ball back and forth on the same team, just passing the ball back and you don't know what to focus on yourself, right? So we so caught up in playing defense. I mean, this administration is what it is, man. It is what America has primarily been to us. You like how many presidents can we say have been staunch allies of ours, right? And we can one hand, you know what I'm saying? Like if we being honest, like I mean, Lincoln was racist, but he did something we could benefit from. He helped us solidify. To me, we freed ourselves, but he helped to make it a political, action, legislation or whatever. Um, then who's the next president, right? That we would give that as someone who helped us in some way explicitly, right? It ain't gonna be Woodrow Wilson. And I don't know about every single president, right? But I know the ones who have done things beneficial. It wasn't Teddy Roosevelt. Woodrow Wilson was holding the screening of Birth of a Nation, which led to the rise of the Klan. It wasn't Herbert Hoover, Mr. Hooverville. It wasn't FDR. Like there were some things that FDR did that eventually impacted and helped us, but that was never his intention. FDR wasn't trying to do anything about lynching. FDR wasn't trying to do anything about segregation until A. Philip Randolph, Bayard Rustin, Mary McLeod Bethune forced him to do things like integrate the military and stuff like that, right? So maybe LBJ, right? Again, he was forced, but he did something that benefited us. So what I'm saying is, if we just mention Lincoln, if we mention Lyndon Baines Johnson, who was racist, but also did some things we benefited from, and then if we throw in Obama, like we want to mention Obama, we saying three people, and we saying both, and we saying both parties, right? And that's not to say that some of these presidents didn't do things that we were able to benefit from, but I'm saying like presidents who explicitly said, I'm trying to do something to help out the plight of Black folks because of what y'all been through. Trump is just, I mean, he's the status quo. It's just that he's coming with these punches so hard at once. Like, but it's like, hey, do you want to get knocked out by Tyson or do you want to lose in 12 rounds? He coming in throwing haymakers. But eventually people who throw haymakers get tired. You know what I'm saying? So like, I'm a firm believer, and I'm a man of faith too, man. So like this type of stuff, I'm deeply rooted in who I am, spiritually, culturally. The people who were once here that are now the reason why I'm here have gone through and persevered through way worse than this. And the folks who made the news headlines when they existed, like a Harriet Tubman, you know what I'm saying, like a Martin Delaney, a Nat Turner, David Walker, Sojourner Truth. These people did not care who the president was. I mean, because truthfully, whoever it was, especially during enslavement, you were helping uphold that system. If you weren't actively fighting against it, John Adams, the second president of the United States, was against slavery, but he wasn't trying to actively do anything to abolish it. You know what I'm saying? So we don't care who the president is. If the goal is liberation, you don't have to get out the way eventually. If you're not on the right side of history as a president morally, if you are going to continue to perpetuate this genocide, the enslavement, the same practices, eventually you're going to find your own demise. You're going to hurt yourself. Like, so I think it's one of those things, again, with the Tyson analogy, is that type of mentality and tactic tires itself out because it eats itself whole as well. We just have to stay the course. We got to focus on building, like, not just building, but maintaining community, coming together. It's going to get worse in some ways for a lot of folks economically and things like that, man. But we got to make sure we have support systems in place. We got to make sure, like I brought up about the rent parties, that we have things that can help benefit folks with mutual aid and co-ops and stuff like that. Because at the end of the day, this is a presidency that is not just going to do things that hurts black people. It's going to hurt far more white people statistically than anything. And if they ain't on the right side of that history yet, they will be forced to be,
I
unfortunately.
agree with that. To plug in another show suggestion, right now there's a new Marvel show called Daredevil.
Oh, okay. I saw that pop up. I didn't watch it
just
yet,
came out,
but I
so
saw it on my
you got
screen.
it. So
Okay. Yeah.
basically, it's a sequel series to a show that ended 7 years ago. In the original series, the bad guy he's like literally a kingpin. His name's Kingpin in the show, but he's like I guess a drug kingpin. They don't really make that clear, but he does illegal activities.
Yeah.
The whole 3 seasons, he's a criminal mastermind. And this one, he's running for mayor of New York. And the Trump allegories are really strong. So if you have time, watch that.
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I saw it when I was scrolling through Disney Plus the other
really
day.
good. It's like a crime drama and like kung fu flick at the same time.
And Daredevil, he is a character who's blind, right? If I'm not mistaken.
He takes place in the You seem to like that Spider-Man show, the one you say you're watching with your kids.
Yeah, he was in there. He was in a couple episodes.
So
thing, right?
It's a lot like that. Is a similar setting, but in the cartoon, that was more in the beginning of his fighting. So I would suggest that. Also, I would suggest it seems right on the nose with Star Wars, Perfect War allegory.
I've never really got into Star Wars, but I've always heard the allegory is definitely there.
I mean, it's right on the nose. You won't miss it. It's nothing you'll like. It's very simple because even kids pick it up. Like I picked up at 9. I was like, oh, politicians are crazy. Matter of fact, Palpatine is a lot like not Bezos, Musk. So
okay. It feels like to me Musk is emulating the comic books. Like he wants to really be the super villain, worldwide richest man ever that takes over the world.
Yeah, that's exactly. He's a lot like they try to say, some people say if Tony Stark was evil, it'd be him, but that's giving Musk too much credit because he doesn't really invent anything. He funds things. He's not inventing these things.
Right.
So, yeah, I do agree with the way you describe Trump, though. Haymakers making him tired. It was like that's kind of why he lost his second run. I mean,
yeah, it's really just. I mean, to me, and he exposes all the flaws of this system, this structure. He exposes just how I think people have always said democracy is fragile. I think we see just how fragile it is. This is all a grand experiment, and I think our flaw collectively is not being able to imagine something better. I think that people put so much stake in the name, the image, the marketing of America. The Star Spangled Banner, the plays, the national anthem, the July, all that stuff is made up, man. Like it could just as easily be something else in 200 years. The most important thing we got to fall back on is just humanity. And that was the battle I would often have in the class is like, do we care more about the content or the children? Do we care more about people or what this nation supposedly represents? And I think that's going to determine where we go moving forward.
With, the Kaepernick thing, he was fighting for people and they made it about the cloth.
Exactly.
I'm like, how does he hate America, but he's staying up for American people?
Exactly, man. It's crazy.
No, there's a lot of allegories with that. Like, you get so caught up in like the vanity things, you're forgetting about the actual people. Like, you're forgetting about the human side of everything.
Yeah, straight up.
All right, so we're over an hour, so I think we basically start to end it. I usually do random questions. Favorite rapper?
It's hard for me to give one answer for anything, but if I got to say one person, it's probably going to be Nas all time. Nas all time right now. I mean, like Kendrick, J. Cole depends on the day, but I've been in the course of Kendrick mood the last year or so, like everybody else.
I'm a Lupe guy.
Oh yeah, no doubt, definitely. I'm got a lot of love for Lupe too.
Is basketball your favorite sport?
Without a doubt.
Keep up with that.
I said again? Yeah, as much as I can, like, outside of the work I do, the thing that keeps me grounded and helps me take my mind off some of this nonsense is keeping up with the NBA, watching First Take, on YouTube when I can to keep up. I'm real big now. I mean, I got 4 daughters, man, 4 daughters and a wife. So like, I'm more so in the WNBA, honestly, but the season ain't going on now. So I keep up, and the Bulls have been trash. So it's just kind of like following everybody else. But I'm a big, like, you know what I'm saying, women's basketball fan, man. Angel Reese, Chicago Sky, following college basketball too. I think in a lot of ways. So once I got over like, oh man, women can't dunk and all these other like just ridiculous excuses people make and I made for not really trying to watch women's basketball, I realized that there's more to me at this point in time in their history, they're more passionate on a competitive level. I think it was what men's basketball used to be like in the 80s and 90s before some of these huge contracts. And I ain't fronting on nobody for getting paid, but in some ways, I think once you get past a certain threshold of millions, I think it takes away some of the competitive edge that some people have or want to have. But to me, like women's basketball still has that. And then even in college ball, they're staying 3 to 4 years. Whereas for the NBA, them dudes either they're gonna probably go, they can play overseas for a year, or they're gonna play in 1 year and they're done. So you don't really build like any type of fandom with that person. Like Juju Watkins is only in her second year. She could play now, but I think she got to stay at least 3 years. So you build with that person,
Yeah,
right? So
that's true because see, I'm in the same boat now. The Sixers aren't good this year after being pretty decent for the
yeah,
past few years. So I'm following other things.
yeah,
I admit it's hard for me to follow the WNBA sometimes because we don't got a Philly team.
yeah.
So I kind of watch everyone.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
But I think one thing the WNBA has is I think the season length is it caters more to being competitive.
yeah. 30 games, 40 games, something like
Whereas like
that.
now the
Yeah,
athletes can technically do more. And obviously we had Dr. J and all
yeah,
of them, but I'm saying like that. Even role players are leaping out the gym now.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and to me, the NBA game, bro. Like, so for example, with the Bulls, I turned to a game yesterday. I think they were playing the Cavs, and the Cavs have the best record in the NBA. I think. Nobody even knows that or even can name somebody outside of Donovan Mitchell. That's a flaw in marketing the game. And also, too, when you watch these games, all they
Yep.
do is shoot threes. Like the Bulls, I don't even know if the Bulls in the top 10 because they got the play in and stuff now. Now, not even in the top 10, but they are third for attempted threes this season, which is crazy, bruh. It
It's
don't
not the
like
race, the styles.
Man, that's what's one thing I really hate about basketball now, at least on the men's side, is when one person is successful doing something, everybody wants to latch on to that. And for a decade plus, everybody has been trying to emulate Steph Curry. As we can see now, there's only one. He's one of one. I think Trey Young tried to do some of that. There is like he is by far. I could be proven wrong. I don't see anybody ever surpassing him as a
No,
shooter.
even this that say so. We seen it. I don't see how that.
And with that type of style, like off the dribble, not just it used to be spot up shooting. He off the dribble half court with it. So like people gotta be comfortable with their own style, man. You got folks on a fast break that's gonna stop and pull up for a three
Yeah, I
nowadays. That's
agree.
trash.
I agree. Okay, so basically we're two people whose teams are bad. Okay.
Yep, yep.
So I kind of asked this, but what could someone like me do to help our this is the last question by the way. What could someone like me who's into sci-fi and all that like I write a little bit too, so what could be
Yeah.
something I could do short term, long term to help?
Something that an epiphany I recently had, and this is not groundbreaking or anything, but I went to my youngest daughters, I went to their school, they're like preschool age, and I read to them for Black History Month, and I read my children's book. And I was just thinking about how groundbreaking that was from the standpoint of those kids in their class, it's a mixed class, might not ever have a Black male teacher. They at least not gonna have one at that primary age because most times guys we ain't messing with
Said
like preschool. We middle middle school enough. We don't like it's just it takes a little too
mm-hmm.
much for our patience.
One of the
I
ironies to
think.
that. So the irony to that is I'm in school to be at elementary.
Oh, that's beautiful, man. We are sorely needed. Like I don't I think that especially with how playful, we can be and how relatable we can be. Like, I wish more of us would consider that. But even myself, I did high school, but now I have an online class for elementary school. But when I walked away from that class, I was like, man, those kids, and the next day, the teachers told me how much they loved it. And I'm thinking too, those kids probably don't even, in their family, they probably don't even know a black man. Like, they parents probably ain't cool with a black man like that in the interpersonal relationship. They might not have a black teacher ever, right? So, and I say all that to say that I think that, and you're on the right path then to be an educator, but like, if black men could find a way to volunteer at a local school, some schools have reading days, men read, black men read. I think that is so transformative, man. If we just come in on a day, get together with some brothers in the community and say, let's go up to our local school. Let's go to the school board meeting and volunteer. Can we come in on this morning for an hour and just read to the preschool, first grade, whatever? It doesn't, like, I think we are under the assumption that everything has to be rah, protest. That protesting, bruh, is good for networking. It's good for, news stories and stuff like that, right? It's good for it. It's a demonstration. It's to demonstrate something that, will come together, but then the real work begins after that. So getting into these schools by any means necessary, and then sharing maybe kids' versions of those comic books and stories like that, because then it sparks the imagination of our kids. So I think that is a transformative thing to do, and I think what you already are in the process of doing is transformative too.
That. Okay, so where can my audience find you at? Like, I know you do content, but where can I see?
So you can find me. I'm on all the social media channels pretty much, but the ones I prefer, Instagram is my number one. So that's at Mr. Crim III. That's MRCRIM3. I'm on TikTok too. I do not post as much. The algorithm does not like me as much as when I first got started. So a lot of my stuff don't really even go far. But I post on there too. Facebook, LinkedIn. You put in my name, I'll pop up. I'm on all of them too. I'm on YouTube too. I don't post as much only because I make more so like short form content, but I'm on there too.
So. All right, well, thank you for coming through. If you're ever free again, please come back on.
Definitely. Thanks for having me, man.
Thank you so much. That's a wrap for the Avatar Slang Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Big shout out to Ernest Crim III for coming through and dropping so much knowledge. His book, How Black History Can Save Your Life, drops March 25th. Support him by pre-ordering at Barnes & Noble, Semicolon Bookstore, a black-owned bookshop in Chicago, by the way, or directly from his website at ernestcrim.com. Audio listeners, hit follow, leave a review, and share the podcast. It's the best way to support. It helps more people discover the show. YouTube viewers, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. More listeners means more episodes, so spread the word. Want to go a step further? Support the podcast at buymeacoffee.com/avatarslang. Every contribution helps bring you more great content. Links are in the YouTube description, podcast description, and my Instagram bio. Stay connected on Instagram and TikTok at Avatar Slang. That's avatar.slang. And share your thoughts on today's topics. Thank you for being a part of the Slang Gang.